We got to get you a virtual background.
Okay.
The recording goes out to the world.
All right, Dr. Bressman, you say it, we're going to do it.
Okay.
All right, we're going to continue learning this Verbringen of Yud Bais Taamuz of 1960. And we just concluded the Rebbe's explanation of the story of the previous Rebbe and the covenant that his father made with him when he introduced him to work for the community, and how sacrifice is needed in order to person needs to not just approach his fellow Jew with logic to reach out to him to help him bring him closer to Hashem, but there has to be this you have to really care. That's what we said till now. Now we're going to the we're on page 198 in the PDF I sent you, and we're going to paraphrase from the Hebrew. The Frierdiker Rebbe, the one whose day of celebration we're celebrating, once spoke at a Verbringen about saving the Torah. There is a concept of the joy of the Torah. The time for the joy of the Torah is on Simchas Torah. And the meaning of the joy, the day of the joy of the Torah is, as it sounds, that then the Torah is joyous. There's also a time of the Simcha of those who keep the Torah, the B'nai Torah. When do people who celebrate, people who keep the Torah and study the Torah, when do they celebrate? They celebrate on Shavuos, the time that Hashem gives us the Torah. And although the Torah was just given, it hasn't yet been studied, but yet at that time, there's a joy of those who are B'nai Torah. The truth is that you can't really differentiate between these two concepts because the Jewish people and the Torah are one. So you can't differentiate between those who keep the Torah and the Torah itself because the Torah and the Jew are one. Especially based upon what Hasidus and Kabbalah say about the source of the Torah and the source of the Jewish people. It says in Kabbalah that the Jew and the Torah are both rooted in the essence of Hashem. The only difference between them is that it says about the Jewish people that Hashem thought about them before the Torah, so to speak. But both the Jewish people and the Torah are rooted in God's essence. And therefore, the Torah cannot exist without the Jewish people, because the whole point of the Torah is, as it says in the Torah, command the children of Israel, speak to the children of Israel. So you can't have Torah without the Jewish people. Torah is a message to the Jewish people. And you also can't have the Jewish people without the Torah, because the Torah is called Chayenu V'Rechemenu, our life and the length of our days. And as it says in Gemara, in the Brachas, a parable about fish. It's just like fish in the ocean, the moment they leave the ocean, they die. So too, the Jewish people without Torah, they can't live. So you can't have Jews without Torah, you can't have Torah without Jews. But nevertheless, when we talk about bringing this into time, there is a distinction about what the focus is. On Shavuos, the celebration is about those who keep the Torah. And on Simchas Torah, the joy is about the Torah itself. So the Frierdiker Rebbe continues, and he says that these two things, the joy of the Torah and the joy of those who keep the Torah, they are experienced after a preparation before. The joy of those who keep the Torah comes after the preparation of the counting of the Yomer. The joy of the Torah itself comes after the Avodah of Elul and Tishrei, and after the days of awe, and after the days of Sukkot, and then we have the joy of the Torah. And so in addition to the Simcha of the people keep the Torah, and the Simcha of the Torah itself, there's another kind of Simcha, and that's the Simcha because of the salvation of the Torah. When the Torah was in danger, there was a decree against the whole existence of Torah and its commandments and the Jewish people, and the decree was nullified. So then it's not the Simcha of the Torah or the Simcha of the Jewish people, rather it's the Simcha of the salvation of the Torah. The Friedrich explains the difference between the simcha of the Torah, or the simcha of the those who observe the Torah, and the simcha, the salvation of the Torah, is similar to the difference between the two kinds of divine energy, mamali and sev. There's divine energy that animates the world, gives each creature its particular life force, and there's the infinite light of Hashem. So the difference between the celebration because of the salvation of the Torah versus the celebration because of the Torah itself is the difference between mamali and sev. How so? There is a way of serving Hashem with your keches pnimiyim, with your internal strengths. So then you're serving Hashem with your internal strength. You're serving Hashem in a limited way based upon what you have inside. And when you reach a certain place, you stop there and you can't continue, because that's as much strength as you have. You can't go anymore. That's when you're serving Hashem with your logic and with your reason. That's when you're serving Hashem with your mamali. In other words, just like Hashem has a limited energy that animates the world, so too you have a limited energy that animates you. And you serve Hashem in a limited way based upon what's inside. That's one way of keeping Torah. And that's the way the Torah is celebrated on Shavuos and on Sukkot and on Simchas Torah. It's the joy of the Torah, the joy of those who keep the Torah. The Torah is given to our understanding. And there is a difference between who is understanding the Torah. There is the Mufla Sheba Sanhedrin, there is the one who's the most wisest in the Jewish court. And there's the Am Haaretz Gomer, then there's the one who's most ignorant. So there's certainly a vast difference between them, the highest to the high and to the lowest to the low in their understanding. And because of the differences in the Torah, in the logic of the Torah, there's also a difference in those who observe the Torah. When we're talking about a decree against the whole concept of Torah and the whole concept of those who keep Torah, we're talking about a decree that affected the very existence of the Torah and the very existence of those who keep Torah. So when this decree this decree causes a similarity in all levels of Torah. This is because of the essence of the Torah and the essence of those who keep the Torah. The essence of every single Jew, as the Talmud says, whether we're talking about a servant or every single Jew, no matter who they are, must say, when will my deeds reach the deeds of my forefathers, Av Mitzvah and Yaakov? So in other words, every Jew has in the capability of reaching the highest of levels. And since our essence has no limitations and boundaries, so this is able to permeate in all matters which do have limitations and boundaries. There is, in other words, there is your very essence. Your very essence, what is essence? Essence is a word. What does it mean? Essence means the deepest part of something. So we could talk about those who understand Torah, like in the Sanhedrin, those who understand the Torah in first grade and say Aleph Beis, and then we could talk about their core, their very essence. So the simcha of learning Torah, the simcha of having the Torah, that's one kind of celebration. But we're talking about a decree that says, you guys, there can't be anyone who keeps Torah anymore. There was a war against the Jews. There's a war against God. And now there's a salvation, and you can keep Torah. There's a salvation that affects the very core of a Jew. It's something which affects everyone equally. And this is what was revealed, and this is the novelty of the salvation of the Torah. What happened on this day is there's a revelation of the essence of the Jew. And the essence of the Jew permeates the essence of yourself, but your deepest part of yourself. Deepest part of yourself affects everything about you. That's your deepest self. It affects what you speak, it affects what you do.
This is Shavuos or Simchas Torah?
That's Yud Bais Taamuz.
Oh.
Because Yud Bais Taamuz was the time when the previous Rebbe was he was in prison, but his imprisonment was meant to stop what he was doing. But he was single-handedly spreading Torah in Russia. So this was a salvation of the essence of Torah, the essence of those who keep the Torah, the essence of the Jew, the essence of Hashem. So it's a different kind of celebration. Not about, we have Torah, let's celebrate the Torah. It reminds me of The difference that the Rebbe Rashab explains Samach Vav between Shuva and Ru'us Liba. The Rebbe Rashab says that Ru'us Liba means you have desire to cleave to Hashem. You're inspired. You want to cleave to Hashem. Then there is this sense of like you're running away from death. You want to escape from somewhere. That's a feeling of Shuva. You want to escape from death. It's not you want to cleave to Hashem. You want to escape from death. You want to live. And so there's something about the celebration of Yud Bais Taamuz, which is like we have the Torah, we have the mitzvahs. So it doesn't make a difference what level of Torah you are in. Your very existence was at stake. And so the salvation is also salvation of your very existence. So what's the nafkamin? Oh, Marcha Yosef, you made it, man. Kol kavod. What's the nafkamina about the celebration of the essence of the Jew, not the essence of the Jew? The bottom line is that what they're saying is we have to study Torah in a way that there are no compromises. Those are the words of the previous Rebbe. He says we have to study Torah without compromises. When you study Torah, the Talmud says that there's a continuation, there's a result, there's a consequence. Torah study brings to action. So since you're studying Torah without any compromises, that's supposed to affect your action also. You keep the Torah also without any compromises. And so this is a sign that now the time has come to actually make this happen. Since the Rebbe says this is demanded of us, certainly we're able to keep this. It's known the rule, Hashem does not come with tricks to his creations. If Hashem asks us to do something, he's not trying to play a trick on us. It must be, as the Talmud says, when Hashem gives, he gives according to what he can give. When he asks us according to our capabilities. So the previous Rebbe says, to study Torah without any compromises, these words of the Frierdiker Rebbe are kuruz ka'osim l'mayla. Kuruz ka'osim l'mayla means it's an announcement that has come down from heaven. These words the previous Rebbe says that we have to study Torah without compromises. That's a kuruz ka'osim l'mayla. There's a similar expression about Baruch Shamar. Baruch Shamar came from a paper that landed from heaven. The words of Baruch Shamar, 87 words, simply came as a paper from heaven. So it says a similar concept about the famous statement about Farbrengens, that Farbrengens can accomplish more than Malach Mochol. So it says this is Pisk Mishmayim Noches, a statement that came down from heaven. So here the Rebbe says these words of the previous Rebbe, with the study of Torah, that the message we're supposed to take from Yud Bais Taamuz, that our approach to study of Torah has to be without any compromises. This is Kruz Kosel L'mayla. It's an announcement that came from heaven, from the leader of the Jewish people, that he knew, and therefore he told us that now is a time that we're able to bring Torah mitzvahs the way they are, all the 613 mitzvahs in all parts of the Torah, in every place, without any compromise, even to the place that you think it can't reach the outside. The way you have to do this, however, has to be with the ways of Torah. The ways of Torah are called ways of pleasantness and ways of peace. Like the Rebbe said on another occasion, previous Rebbe said on another occasion, you can't pull off someone's nose. And when you speak in a pleasant way, then the words will be accepted with a smile as well by those people which, for whatever reason, presently aren't yet ready to accept these words in their thoughts, speech, and action, but they also have an ear that hears. So even though at first we speak to them, they may be only hearing it, hearing, but after time, they'll be able to reach a level of dead hearing. In general, the previous Rebbe explains that there's different levels of hearing. He says that as we're discussing on Shabbos, he says that when you hear something just with your ears, that's not called hearing at all. When you hear something with your mind is sort of soivet. Your mind is sort of like, it's a little transcendent. It's not really you. So it doesn't really bring to action. When you hear something with your heart, it's closer to action, but not necessarily will it bring to action. Your heart is also distant from your action. When you hear something, however, with your rotzen and time, with your pleasure, when something touches your pleasure, then it goes immediately into action. When something touches your time, when something touches you have enjoyment of something, that touches your pleasure. So those are levels of hearing. Then the previous Rebbe said that's a level of hearing. So you hear something with your desire, you hear something with your pleasure, something touched you, something was advertised to you in a way that, this sounds geschmack. That's only called hearing. There's a whole other level called derher. Derher means something that's permeated you till every fiber of your being. That there's nothing that hasn't heard it. That there's something which has reached you, and there's nothing that in you that hasn't heard it. So you're sharing Torah with somebody, and you want them to hear it. So the Rebbe says it may be that they're hearing it yet. They're not at a level of there's no derher yet. But first of all, they're hearing it, and little by little, after time will go on, they'll also reach level to derher, the words that you're sharing with them. What this means is as follows. Torah has a similar effect to fire. As it says in the pasuk, my words, Hashem says, are like fire. So the end is that the words of Torah permeate and change the existence of things. For example, it says about different items, they're purified in different ways. Like it says, for example, metal items, put them in a mikvah and they're purified. And there are different ways things are koshered. It says in general in the kol davar sheyav tevir beish, kol davar sheyav mayim termayim, anything which you cook on it with water, so way to kosher it is also to put hot water in it. Anything which you roast in it on fire, so you have to roast it in fire in order to put the libun. What about something which is made of earthenware? Earthenware is an exception. There's no way to kosher earthenware, because the Talmud says that even when you put it into hot water, there's still going to be something that's going to come out, be dicey. There's still something in it that won't come out completely with putting it into hot water. And we're afraid that if you put it into fire, you're going to break it. You might not put it in properly. The only way to kosher earthenware is to bring it back into the kiln. Bring it back into the kiln. Shmuel Einstein actually did it. He actually, I don't know how he did it exactly, but he actually brought the earthenware back in the kiln to basically to redo it. So the words of Torah are called fire, and they're able not just to reach everywhere, but they're able to cause. Why does earthenware become kosher when it's put back into the kiln? Because it's considered a brand new thing. So in a similar way, Torah can cause a person to become a brand new person. Every Jew is considered like earthenware. Because why we consider like earthenware? Because God made every person from earth. Everyone's made out of the earth. That's called Adam. Adam comes from Adam, from the earth. So why were we made? We're made to become a vessel for godliness. So when we go back into the kiln, Dr. Bressman thinks this doesn't sound like fun, going back into the kiln. Going back in the kiln doesn't mean going to hell. Going back in the kiln means going into Torah. Torah is compared to fire. And especially when you when you speak to a Jew about Torah, you know what you're really doing? You're bringing them back into the kiln. Especially if you speak Torah, speak from your heart. If you say words of fire. There was a Jew. Oh, Shalom Aleichem. Sabbacher. Okay. All right. There was a chas the previous Rebbe, Simcha Grodetsky. I don't remember what city in Russia it was. The previous Rebbe wanted him to start a new yeshiva in a certain city. So this is what he told him to do. He says, fast for 3 days. And after you finish fasting for 3 days, go into the main synagogue and clap on the bima and say whatever you have in your heart. So he fasted for 3 days. He spoke in the bima. I think he fainted also. And he had students. So there are words of fire, and there's words that are said with fire. Torah is in general called words of fire, but the words of Torah, when you say the words of Torah with fire of your heart, that affects the one who's listening. So sooner or later, the Rebbe says, the end is you're going to make that person to become a new vessel. He may be an earthenware vessel which has become contaminated, but you're bringing him back into the kiln by speaking the words of Torah. That's halacha about earthenware, that even if it has become disgusting, even if it has become impure, but by bringing it back into the kiln, it stops losing whatever the impurity. It loses impurity, it loses whatever is disgusting in it, and it becomes a brand new vessel. And then what you can do with this new vessel, you can pour into this vessel oil. What's oil mean? Oil means the secrets of the Torah, together with the revealed parts of Torah. and to make out of this person who has previously been contaminated, to make him into a candle that will shine to the outside, until the whole world is full of the glory of Hashem. So in short, in this talk we just did now, the Rebbe said is that there are different kinds of celebrations. There's celebrations because you're able to keep Torah, and there's celebrations about not just you're able to keep, because you have a Torah, someone giving you a Torah. The celebration because Torah was in danger, and now Torah was saved. The Jewish people were in danger, or observant people want to keep the Torah, their lives were in danger, now they're able to keep the Torah. That kind of celebration is something which has to do with the very core of being Jewish. And because the celebration of your essence, what this celebration is meant to give you is to approach Torah from the perspective of your essence. So you could learn Torah and you could share Torah in a limited way, and you have in a way of mamali. The way of mamali means that you do as much as makes sense and you stop. Or it could be in a way of saving in an unlimited way that you don't put any limitations in it because it's coming from your core. My cousin, Rabbi Levin in Palo Alto, he was having a very hard time when he first started out over there. And you want to take care of him? Take care of him. So okay, so he first came to Palo Alto, so he was having a very hard time, and he visited Ebbes Farbrengen. They were speaking about the Haftarah of Shabbos Chol Moed Sukkos, Chol Moed Pesach. There, the Torah says the story of Ezekiel, and Ezekiel was the valley of the dry bones. I told you the story, no? The valley of the dry bones, and Hashem told Yechezkel that he should talk to the dry bones, and Hashem then resurrected the dry bones. Speak to the bones. The bones are very dry, and Hashem says, "I will give, and I will breathe life into these dry bones." And in this valley of the dry bones, there was Tchias HaMesim. There's a discussion what happened to those dry bones later. Did they continue to live or not? Some say that they resurrected, and they went off to move to Israel, and they got married, and they lived. There's Tchias HaMesim happened. Others say that they're just for a moment, whatever. But that was the story of Yechezkel. So Rebbe said by this Farbrengen, there's a young man, and he's in the valley. Rebbe didn't say which valley he's in, but my cousin Palo Alto felt that I was talking to him. This young man in the valley. That's what was going on in his life, and he feels like everybody around him is dry, and not just dry, very dry. Then what should I do? Everybody around me is very dry. So the Rebbe said, we need to do is, as it said, Hashem told Yechezkel, if you, Ben Adam, give prophecy, speak to the dry bones. You know, it seems like they can't hear you. Speak to the dry bones, and there will be Tchias HaMesim, be the resurrection of the dead. They will live. So that's what actually happened. He said he remembers his first day on the job after he came to Farbrengen. He remembers how he approached this guy who he knew for many years, and every week they would have a cigar together. And that week he came back and he says, "Oh, let me tell you something that I learned this week." I was like, "All right, tell me." And he says that totally transformed their relationship, and it transformed this person. The guy was one way before, and he became a whole different person. So this is the these words that the Rebbe told him is what the Rebbe is telling us here in the Sikha over here. The Rebbe is saying, you see a Jew, and you don't see a vessel to give light. What do you see? You see this guy is an impure vessel. You see this guy is an impure vessel. You can say about yourself, but you see it in someone else. That's how you see the other person. Just like the Rebbe told Yechezkel, Hashem told Yechezkel, listen, tell the dry bones, listen to the word of Hashem, so too a Jew has to share the words of Torah with another Jew and not ignore the way things look on the outside. Don't look at the way things are. Who are you really speaking to? You're really speaking to a candle. You're really speaking to a candle to give light. It doesn't look like it. Yud Avner was the advisor of many Israeli prime ministers. He was once invited to the Rebbe famously, and he was so impressed with the Rebbe and the Rebbe's understanding of Israel. He was an advisor to these prime ministers, so he certainly knew a lot about Israeli politics and Israeli policy. And he's so impressed with the Rebbe. He asked him, "What's your ambition in life?" And the Rebbe said that his ambition in life is that a Jew is like he took out a candle from his drawer. They said, "What is this?" He says, "It's a candle." The Rebbe said, "No, it's a ball of wax with a wick inside. It's not a candle." He said, "When does a candle become a candle? The candle becomes a candle only when the wick is lit." So Rebbe said, "That's my ambition in life. Every Jew has this capability. My ambition is to light up every Jew, to light up the candle." So he asked the Rebbe, "Did you fulfill your ambition in your conversation with me?" So the Rebbe said, "No, but I gave you a match. So that's the Rebbe saying over here. When you have a word of Torah to share, when I was studying in 770, during the summertime, they had this program. They still have the program, a Jewish Peace Corps sort of. You go out to a far off place where there's no Jewish community, and you go for 2 weeks, and you just like try to meet these Jews. And my mission was to York. That's where I was sent 1 year. There's New York. I sent to the old one. So
York, Pennsylvania?
no, York, England.
Oh.
Jews aren't actually original York.
Okay.
So Jews are not actually allowed to live in York because there's a famous story. There was one of the Bali Tesvis. There's a tower they called Cliff's Tower, and there was some kind of government, some kind of deal was made with Richard the Lionheart, who was actually very close to Jewish people, but whatever. But they made some kind of agreement, and his soldiers were supposed to. Long story short, they ended up massacring hundreds of Jews there, and the Chacham made a decree: no one's allowed to live in York anymore. But people still live in York, and that was we were supposed to go there. So anyway, so before going to York or before going to any of these missions, you get it tested. You get tested by the administration of the Yeshiva in 770. What you get tested in, you have to have something to share. Well, you have to have a word of Torah. You have to have something you know very well that you have to share. So in other words, you're not supposed to go. You're going to York. What are you going with? You're going with your smile, with your charisma. To have a word of Torah. So, and it seems like you're going to these people who don't know anything about Yiddishkeit. And so, but that's not what's going to. You have to go with the fire. You have to have fire. Take with you fire, and not only to take with you fire. That says over here. Yes, Rabbi Chadakov also told those who go on this mission to take slippers and deodorant and soap. Slippers for Tisha B'Av, because you can't wear leather shoes on Tisha B'Av, and he wanted the yeshiva students to take showers, so he used deodorant and soap, so that they should. Because these boys weren't so careful in their hygiene. Anyways, thank you, Jonathan. Anyways, so the point is that just like you need to take the earthenware vessel and put it back into the kiln to make it pure, so too when you speak to a Jew, you have to know that it says you're able to transform this person from being impure or being ugly, whatever it is, and to make them able to hold the oil so they could actually shine. That's it. And what tool do you have? You have the words of Torah. But to forget besides the words of Torah, to say the words of Torah are fire, but say it with the fire of your heart. You don't have to necessarily fast for 3 days like Simcha Gordetsky, but as the Rebbe said, whenever you speak to a Jew about Yiddishkeit, you should say a chapter of Tehillim first and ask Hashem to be able to talk from your heart. You talk from your heart, and you're able to. And don't look at the outside. These words of Torah, first I'll hear it, the Rebbe says, and eventually there'll be a change, and this person will become a vessel. So you have to pour the oil in and light him up, so he'll give light himself to others. That's the word. And if you don't believe me, look at yourselves. Right? This is the story of our lives. More yours than mine. And I was born to keep on my head, but okay. Any questions, comments? All right,